This is a hot rod DeVille ML inspired by Michael Landau. It's a relatively rare version of the hot rod DeVille 2x12, as is the George Benson. And as it came in, it has a few things noticeably wrong. This screw up here is very loose and the chassis is wobbling. And the screw up here doesn't want to turn, which tells me that it has been bent somehow. And before I can get to the big punchline, let me show you a pet peeve of mine. This screw, the slots in the screw head are all deformed, and inside that is a bunch of nylon gunk. And that nylon gunk actually comes from the slip cover this amp came with. When you use the wrong size screwdriver, these little edges get sharp, and it just takes little bitty nips out of the nylon slip cover, and they all fill up in here, and a screwdriver head will not fit in there cleanly. So the next time you try to use a screwdriver on there, it doesn't fit, doesn't make a good contact, and then the problem gets worse. It just strips the screw head more and more each time. So I'm going through all six screw heads to get all that gunk out, so my Phillips will mate properly with it. And they're all pretty deformed, so pending other work on the amp and decisions the owner makes, I may get in here and order some replacement screws from Fender. That'd be the six that hold the top panel on, and the 4 on each side, at least one of which is pretty badly bent. Anyway, let me use my power screwdriver now to get these off, and then we'll get to the fun part. One more boring but important thing I want to show before I get to the big bad problem in this amp. Look at this gap between the top of the chassis and the cabinet. It's very, very important on all amps, but especially the blues and hot rods and Fender reissue series, to make sure all the hardware is tight. It rarely is, and it really causes a lot of problems. Anyway, let's get to the meat of the issue here. I believe I was saying something about it being important that hardware be tight. It also is important that hardware is present. Let's see. Speaker screw is missing here, present here, seems to be entirely missing. No one is remaining, bottom left on this one. Now, someone has soldered all these. I believe they're still quick connects from the factory like the other hot rod series. Maybe they just got tired of the plastic molded cable. So someone took a lot of care to do this, but none of the screws, or very few of the screws, are left, and there's a Kep's nut floating on that magnet. I wonder where that goes, or went. And let's see, one other fun thing floating around here. Back to the top left, I noticed the screw was free spinning. It's because the pop rivet nut thing that's supposed to be welded to the chassis had come loose. That'll probably just get epoxied back in place. I'll put it to the side with the other hardware. This amp has seen things, man. I wonder if it works. All right, I just snipped these wires and got this speaker out. I bet that Kep's nut is one of the ones that holds the front panel, the baffle to the cabinet. This one's totally free spinning with my finger. So yeah, they're all loose. And this speaker is only held in place by 2 of the 4 screws. So in a little while, I'll pull this chassis out so I can access everything. Right now, I'm going to see if I can tighten up these 2 screws and keep this frame on the speaker from deforming. All right, this one tightened up. The other one did not. Let me move the 6L6s out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and remove those 2 screws and get this speaker out as well. The owner wanted to get some new speakers for this amp. I don't think he's even heard these. Let me move the camera out of my way and do this. This is just a screwdriver, no real mystery there. All right, I had to pull the chassis. Here's one of the screws that's supposed to hold a speaker in place. Obviously did a really good job. It's got a non-stock screw here that is free turning, as if the T-nut on the other side has broken free of the wood, which would not surprise me given the stress this thing has undergone. Let me get this out, if I can. There it goes. And then this remaining, only the one that could be tightened. All right. And its frame's all deformed just like the first ones. What a surprise. It's a good thing the owner wanted to get some new speakers for this, because these were about killed. Now, given the severity of all these problems, I have I'm not casting any aspersions on the owner. I don't think that this was necessarily someone deliberately trying to kill their amp. It's more likely that this amp was shipped. Maybe they just bought it and it came in shipped. Yeah, the top left screw that holds, the top left and the top right screws that hold the baffle to the chassis are totally missing their caps nuts. What I want to do first, before I do anything else, is see if the factory screw will go in and tighten into all of the factory T-nuts. Now this one here on the other side was loose. Well, I'm glad to say I have very good news for the owner. While a couple of the T-nuts on the other side are slightly loose, they're only mostly dead, just mostly dead. I can get a new screw that'll secure a speaker in there, and the act of tightening it properly with the toothed washer so it doesn't vibrate loose will actually secure that to the wood. I've already done the other 5 Keps nuts. I thought I'd do this one on camera. It's very crucial that these all be tight and they're all loose and I could turn them with my fingers. Many times on repair tickets, I'll write down, tightened all nuts and hardware. And some guys are like, well, why you charge me for that? I could have done that. To which my response ever shall be, what was stopping you? Funny how that works. And then they complain that you did something they could have done themselves. Or that their brother-in-law's cousin's sister's friend read in a forum. Anyway, so the baffle is tight. The baffle has no severe structural damage. It can accept new speakers. A lot of the mystery hardware that was floating around has been explained. Now it's the time to see if the amp itself is working. Okay, a little bit different view than you usually get hot rods on this channel. Usually I can keep them in the cabinet working on them. On this one, I had to pull the chassis, so I don't see any leakage on the caps, the filter caps. That doesn't mean they're good. I don't see any heat discoloration around the cement resistors, but in this model they're 330 ohms, which dissipate less heat than the 470s because they're being asked to drop less voltage. Don't see any visible damage on the board. The fuse is the correct value. The holder was a little bit loose. The nuts on the jacks were a little bit loose. The power switch and standby were tight. I'll verify all the pot nuts are tight. As you can tell, there are components missing on this version that are there in most, like that master volume for the gain channel, and a lot of components. The mic Landau is more like having 2 variations on channel 1 with a little bit, you can set the different levels of gain. Got it hooked up to my shop cab, and I've got it going through my current limiter. Given the abuse this amp has suffered, I don't quite trust it. Before I power it on, there's one other thing I want to check. 2 other things I want to check. Two. Make sure that all the grounds are tight. There's one here by the input, and there's the main power ground. Those weren't the tightest, but they weren't that loose. And I'm going to verify that the transformers aren't rattling around. They may not be as tight as I'd like, but just have to make sure they're not really loose. It's hard to get to that one. Just slightly loose. These 2, it's a larger transformer than on some of the hot rods, and it's right beneath the switches. So I'll revisit that from the other side. Anyway, let's power it on and see what happens. Let's take it out of standby. Just the dimmest hint of a glow on the light bulb limiter, so I'll leave that on for about 5 minutes just to verify everything's good. All right, let's see what it sounds like. It doesn't sound like, that's not good. Is that both channels? All right, let's see if it's a tube. Which tube is it? So we have a slight bit of hum in the output, regardless whether the amp's powered on or in standby, but we don't have any signal. Let's check some voltages. That's good. I hear it when I measure the phase inverter output. Before I worry about this too much, let's just replace preamp tubes one at a time. That's a normal amount of noise as I pull the phase inverter tube. Do I have a bad phase inverter tube? Yep, bad phase inverter tube. Okay. Let's just verify that, shall we? We'll put it in V2. Same tube that was in the phase inverter. Should still have no signal. And let me adjust the levels and the volumes. Yeah, a whole lot of nothing. Put that old Softtech back in place. Because I was going into the effects return, that would limit the options to either the effects loop stuff with the op amps, the phase inverter tube, or the output tubes, and then as an outlier, the output transformer. But I was hearing the sound at a normal level when I measured the voltage on the phase inverter. What's odd to me is that I was getting 280 something volts at that plate. And I still am, 240 something now, which meant that this triode, the triode I measured, was drawing current. It's possible that the other triode was not, the one with 100K. Anyway. I'm not sure what I just switched. I mean, I know bright and channel changing. What is that switch on the ML? So it's boost. Okay. Well, that all seems pretty good. That doesn't. Let's see, which of these is the cause of that nasty noise? We got more than one problem at once as far as microphonics go. So pull V1. All right, so this amp probably has, I mean, it definitely had a bad V3 and probably a very microphonic V1. Here's a Ruby labeled thing in my stash, letting it warm up. All right. Okay, good. We don't have a bad output tube. We just had a really noisy tube in V1 and a dead one in V3. The one from V3 is still very warm, by the way. And depending on the client's budget, I would like to change out the remaining original tube as well if its two mates failed in this amount of time. But that's not my call at this point. The amp seems to be behaving itself. It's the Landau. Let's give it some bridge humbucker. It's just too loud to comfortably play. With that humbucker like that, it's just an awful lot of output on these things. And the volume goes from nothing to in your face. But at that level, it sounds pretty good. It's a higher noise floor than I would expect. Is it in the reverb? It's a rushing water sound. Might be that ruby I stuck in there from my stash. It goes away when I do that. What else do I have I can pop in here temporarily? Let's see how it does with a old RCA from the 60s. I must remember to pull from this amp and give him something else to go home with. This RCA is kind of my, is it the tube or the amp tester? If it sounds bad with this, it's the amp. If it sounds better than you expected, it's the tube. Alright, it's picking up my Wi-Fi router, but that rushing water is not there anymore. 2 preamp tubes, output tubes seem fine. 3rd preamp tube, totally optional. He wants new speakers, and it's missing a presence knob. He wants a new knob. So when this amp came in and I saw that speaker dangling, I was like, oh my God, this could be a real nightmare. But I think the owner is getting very lucky. So I will give him a call and let him watch this video, and then we'll discuss speakers.